My name is Sarah, and I'm about to share the most transformative journey of my life. What started as a simple online gaming session turned into a love story that spanned continents, challenged everything I believed about relationships, and ultimately taught me that some connections transcend physical boundaries in ways I never imagined possible. You might wonder why anyone would risk everything for someone they'd never met in person. In our digital age, millions of people form deep connections online, yet society often dismisses these relationships as less real or meaningful. The truth is, virtual love can be just as intense, genuine, and life-changing as any traditional romance you'll encounter. This story will take you through every emotion, every obstacle, and every triumph of my journey to meet the person who captured my heart from 10,000 kilometers away. You'll experience the doubt, the hope, the fear, and ultimately the incredible joy that comes with taking the biggest leap of faith imaginable for love. I'm sharing this not as a relationship expert, but as someone who lived through this extraordinary experience. Every detail I'm about to tell you actually happened. Every emotion was real, and every decision carried consequences that shaped the person I am today. This isn't fiction. It's my reality. The story begins in the most unexpected place, during one of the loneliest periods of my life, when I had given up on finding meaningful connection altogether. 2 years ago, I was working a demanding corporate job in Seattle, spending 12-hour days in a cubicle, coming home to an empty apartment. My last relationship had ended badly 6 months earlier, and I'd sworn off dating entirely. The endless cycle of disappointing first dates and shallow connections had left me emotionally exhausted and cynical about modern romance. My only escape was an online multiplayer game called Mystic Realms, where I could lose myself in fantasy adventures and forget about my mundane reality. Gaming had always been my sanctuary, a place where I could be anyone, do anything, and connect with people without the pressure of physical appearance or social expectations weighing me down. The virtual world offered something my real life lacked: genuine interaction based purely on personality, humor, and shared interests. In this digital space, people reveal their true selves more freely, without the masks we often wear in face-to-face encounters. I found conversations that lasted hours, friendships that felt more authentic than many real-world relationships I'd experienced. It was during one of these late-night gaming sessions that I first encountered Dragonheart 9-2, and like other players who rushed through quests, he took time to help newcomers, shared resources generously, and had this incredible ability to make everyone in our guild feel valued and included in every conversation we had. What I didn't know was that this simple online interaction would soon evolve into something that would completely transform my understanding of love, connection, and what it means to truly know another person. Our first real conversation happened during a particularly challenging raid that required hours of coordination. While other players grew frustrated and quit, Dragonheart 90 to remain patient, encouraging, and surprisingly funny. His messages weren't just about game strategy. He asked genuine questions about my day, my thoughts, and somehow made me feel heard in ways I hadn't experienced in years. After weeks of text-based conversations, he suggested we move to voice chat for better game coordination. I was nervous. Voices reveal so much more than text, but when I heard him speak for the first time, I was struck by his warm, gentle tone and the way he laughed at my terrible jokes with genuine appreciation and enthusiasm. His name was Alex, and he lived in Melbourne, Australia. He was a software developer, 2 years older than me, with a passion for astronomy and a rescue dog named Pixel. What struck me most wasn't these basic facts, but how easily our conversations flowed from gaming to philosophy, from childhood memories to future dreams and aspirations. The time difference meant our conversations often happened during my evening and his morning, creating this intimate bubble where the rest of the world seemed to disappear. We talked for hours about everything and nothing, sharing stories, dreams, fears, and the kind of vulnerable thoughts I'd never shared with anyone before in my life. Slowly, I realized I was looking forward to these conversations more than anything else in my day, counting hours until I could hear his voice again and share whatever had happened in my world. 3 months into our friendship, something shifted during one of our late-night conversations. We were discussing a movie we'd both watched, and Alex made a comment about wishing he could share experiences like that with someone special. There was a pause, and then he quietly said, "I wish you were here to watch it with me." The vulnerability in his voice made my heart skip. I found myself admitting that I'd been thinking the same thing, that I'd catch myself wondering what it would be like to have him beside me during funny moments or beautiful sunsets. These weren't just friendly thoughts anymore. They carried a weight and longing that surprised us both. We started having deeper conversations about relationships, past heartbreaks, and what we were looking for in life. I discovered that Alex had also been hurt before, had also given up on finding someone who truly understood him. We shared our fears about vulnerability, our dreams for the future, and our growing feelings for each other. The shift from friendship to something deeper happened gradually, then suddenly. One evening, after a particularly meaningful conversation about our childhood dreams, Alex said, "Sarah, I think I'm falling for you." My heart stopped, because I knew I felt the same way, despite never having met him in person. This realization terrified and thrilled me simultaneously, opening up a world of possibilities I'd never considered, while also presenting challenges I had no idea how to navigate or overcome. Admitting our feelings opened floodgates of emotion and intimacy I hadn't expected. Our conversations became more frequent and deeper, spanning topics from our daily routines to our deepest fears and aspirations. Alex would send me good morning messages that brightened my entire day, and I'd fall asleep to his voice during our evening calls, feeling more connected than I'd ever felt with someone physically present. We started sharing photos beyond our gaming avatars, pictures of our daily lives, our surroundings, our pets, and eventually ourselves. Seeing Alex's face for the first time was surreal. He was exactly as I'd imagined, yet completely different, with kind eyes and a smile that made my heart race even through a screen display. Our relationship developed its own rhythm and rituals. We'd watch movies together over video calls, cook the same meals while chatting, and even go to sleep together, leaving our calls connected through the night. These shared experiences felt incredibly real and meaningful, creating a bond that transcended our physical separation across continents. But virtual love also came with unique challenges. Time zones meant sacrificing sleep for conversations. I couldn't comfort him during bad days with a hug, and he couldn't be physically present during my difficult moments. Friends and family struggled to understand the depth of our connection, often dismissing it as not real or temporary infatuation. Despite these obstacles, my feelings for Alex continued growing stronger each day, leading me to question everything I thought I knew about love, relationships, and what it means to truly connect with another human being. When I finally told my closest friends about Alex, their reactions ranged from concern to outright skepticism. My best friend Jessica was particularly vocal about her worries, asking pointed questions about how I could truly know someone I'd never met. She'd heard horror stories about online deception and catfishing, and her protective instincts kicked into overdrive regarding my emotional investment. My family's reaction was even more challenging to navigate. My mother listened politely, but I could see the worrying in her eyes, the unspoken questions about whether I was losing touch with reality. My father was more direct, suggesting I was using this virtual relationship to avoid dealing with real-world dating challenges and emotional growth. Co-workers who overheard me talking about Alex often made jokes about imaginary boyfriends or shared cautionary tales about online relationships gone wrong. Their skepticism planted seeds of doubt in my mind, making me question whether what Alex and I shared was genuine or just an elaborate fantasy we'd both bought into for emotional comfort. The constant questioning from others made me analyze our relationship more critically. Was I in love with Alex, or just in love with the idea of him? How could I be certain he was being truthful about his life, his feelings, his intentions? These doubts created anxiety that began affecting our conversations and my overall well-being. Yet every time I spoke with Alex, every shared laugh and meaningful conversation, every moment of genuine connection we experienced together, these doubts would fade, replaced by the undeniable reality of what we'd built together across the digital divide. 6 months into our relationship, during one of our regular evening calls, Alex brought up something that had been on both our minds but neither had dared to voice. "Sarah," he said, his voice carrying a nervous excitement, "what if we met in person? What if one of us visited the other?" The question hung in the air between us, loaded with possibility and terror. We'd both been thinking about it, but the logistics seemed overwhelming. The distance between Seattle and Melbourne wasn't just geographical, it represented visa requirements, expensive flights, time off work, and the ultimate test of whether our connection would survive the transition from virtual to physical reality. The stakes felt impossibly high for both of us. Alex had been researching flights and visa requirements for weeks. He presented a plan. He could take 2 weeks off work and visit Seattle. He'd already started the visa application process and had been saving money for months. His thoroughness and commitment made my heart race with excitement and absolute terror in equal measure. The practical considerations were daunting. Where would he stay? How would we navigate the awkwardness of meeting someone you love but have never touched? What if the chemistry we felt online didn't translate to real life? What if we disappointed each other? These questions kept me awake at night, wrestling with possibility and fear. But underneath all the practical concerns and fears lay a deeper truth. I loved Alex, and the thought of finally being in the same room with him, of seeing his smile in person and hearing his laugh without the filter of technology, was worth any risk we might face together. After days of internal debate and long conversations with Alex, I realized that fear was the only thing standing between us and potentially the most important moment of our lives. We'd built something beautiful and real across 10,000 kilometers. We owed it to ourselves to discover what it could become when distance was no longer a barrier between us. I told Alex yes, that I wanted him to visit, but I also wanted to contribute to making it happen. We decided to split the costs of his trip, making it a joint investment in our future. This financial commitment made everything feel more real and serious, transforming our dream into concrete plans with specific dates and expectations. The planning phase was both exciting and nerve-wracking. We researched restaurants we wanted to try together, places in Seattle we wanted to visit, and activities that would help us transition from virtual to physical companionship. Every detail we planned together increased my anticipation and anxiety in equal measure, making the approaching visit feel both thrilling and terrifying. I found myself preparing for his visit in ways I'd never prepared for any date or relationship milestone before. This wasn't just about looking good or making a good impression. It was about whether the person I'd fallen in love with online would love the real, physical me, complete with imperfections and nervous energy. The visa approval came through faster than expected, and suddenly we had a date. Alex would arrive in Seattle in 6 weeks, staying for 2 incredible weeks that would determine the future of our relationship and our lives. With Alex's arrival date set, every day became a countdown filled with anticipation, preparation, and moments of overwhelming anxiety. I found myself oscillating between excitement about finally meeting the person I loved and terror about whether reality would live up to our virtual connection. The weeks crawled by with agonizing slowness, each day bringing us closer to our moment of truth. I threw myself into preparing for his visit with an intensity that surprised even me. I deep cleaned my apartment, researched the best local restaurants, and planned a loose itinerary of activities that would give us options without overwhelming our first days together. Every preparation felt monumentally important, as if the success of his entire visit depended on these details being perfect. My friends and family watched my preparations with a mixture of amusement and concern. Jessica offered to be on standby in case I needed support or an escape plan, while my mother insisted on meeting Alex during his visit. Their protective instincts were touching but added another layer of pressure to an already emotionally charged situation. Sleep became elusive as the date approached. I'd lie awake at night, playing out different scenarios of our first meeting. Would we hug immediately? Would there be awkward silence? Would the physical chemistry match our emotional connection? These questions circled endlessly through my mind, making rest nearly impossible to achieve. Alex was experiencing similar emotions on his end, sharing his own anxieties and excitement during our daily calls, creating a feedback loop of nervous energy that made the waiting period both unbearable and precious as our final days of purely virtual connection. 3 days before Alex's departure from Melbourne, I had a complete panic attack. The reality of what we were doing hit me like a freight train. I was about to meet someone I'd never seen in person, someone who could be completely different from the person I'd fallen in love with online. What if we had nothing to talk about face to face? What if the magic disappeared without screens between us? I called Alex in tears, voicing all my fears and doubts in a jumbled, emotional confession. What if I disappointed him? What if he took one look at me and realized he'd made a terrible mistake? What if 2 weeks together destroyed the beautiful relationship we'd built over months of careful virtual courtship and deep emotional connection? Alex listened patiently to my breakdown, then shared his own fears with equal vulnerability. He was terrified too, worried about the same things, questioning whether he was making the biggest mistake of his life or the best decision he'd ever made. His honesty about his own anxiety somehow made me feel less alone and crazy in my emotional spiral. We talked for hours that night, working through our fears together and reminding ourselves why we decided to take this leap. We'd built something special, something worth exploring in person. Yes, it was risky, but the alternative, always wondering what if, seemed worse than facing our fears together and discovering the truth about our connection. By the end of that conversation, we'd both found our courage again, ready to face whatever came next with honesty, openness, and the love we'd cultivated across continents and time zones. Alex's flight from Melbourne to Seattle was a grueling 15-hour journey with a layover in Los Angeles. We stayed in contact throughout his travel day, with him sending updates from the airport, photos from the plane, and messages about his growing excitement and nervousness as each mile brought him closer to our meeting point. I tracked his flight obsessively, watching the little airplane icon creep across the Pacific Ocean on my phone screen. Every update brought a fresh wave of butterflies to my stomach. This was really happening after months of virtual connection. We were about to be in the same physical space, breathing the same air, existing in the same reality. The night before his arrival, I barely slept, running through my mental checklist one final time. I'd taken the next 2 days off work to help him adjust to the time change and to give us uninterrupted time together. My apartment was spotless. I'd stocked the refrigerator with his favorite foods we discussed, and I'd even bought new sheets for the guest room where he'd be staying. I changed my outfit 3 times the morning of his arrival, finally settling on something casual but flattering jeans and a soft sweater that made me feel confident and comfortable. I wanted to look like myself, not like someone trying too hard to impress, but I also wanted to look my best for this momentous occasion. As I drove to Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, my hands were shaking on the steering wheel, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it over the radio, knowing that in just a few hours, everything would change forever. Standing in the international arrivals area at SeaTac Airport, I felt like I might throw up from nerves. I held a simple sign with Alex's name, though we joked that we'd probably recognize each other instantly. The reality of the moment was overwhelming after months of video calls and thousands of messages. I was about to see him walk through those doors in 3 dimensions. Flight 847 from Los Angeles had landed 20 minutes ago, and passengers were beginning to stream through the arrival gate. My eyes scanned every face, my heart jumping at every tall, dark-haired man who emerged. I checked my phone obsessively, seeing Alex's last message, Just got through customs. See you in 5 minutes. I'm so nervous and excited I can barely breathe right now. Then I saw him. Even from a distance, even exhausted from travel and carrying a heavy backpack, he was unmistakably Alex. The way he moved, the way he looked around the crowded terminal. The nervous smile playing at the corners of his mouth, everything was exactly as I'd imagined, yet completely new and real and overwhelming. Our eyes met across the crowded terminal, and for a moment, time seemed to stop completely. He broke into the smile I'd seen in countless photos and video calls, but seeing it in person, directed at me, made my knees weak. He dropped his backpack and started walking faster, and I found myself moving toward him without conscious thought. The distance between us closed quickly, and suddenly we were standing face to face, real and solid and present, both of us grinning like idiots and not quite knowing what to do with our hands or our overwhelming emotions. "Sarah," Alex said softly, even though he knew it was me, his voice carrying the same warmth I'd fallen in love with, but now accompanied by his physical presence, his height, his smell. The reality of him standing right there in front of me after so many months of longing and imagination and hope. "It's really you," I whispered back, feeling tears prick at my eyes. All the fears and doubts I'd harbored seemed silly now, faced with the undeniable reality that this was Alex, my Alex, the person I'd laughed with and cried with and fallen in love with across thousands of miles and countless late-night conversations. Without another word, we stepped into each other's arms. The hug was everything I'd hoped it would be and more warm, familiar despite being our first, and filled with months of pent-up affection and longing. He was taller than I'd expected, and I had to stand on my tiptoes to wrap my arms properly around his neck. We held each other for a long moment, right there in the middle of the busy airport terminal, oblivious to the travelers streaming around us. I could feel his heart beating rapidly against my chest, matching the frantic rhythm of my own. This was real, he was real, we were real, and everything we'd built together had just become tangible. When we finally pulled apart, both of us were emotional, eyes bright with tears of relief and joy and the overwhelming realization that our leap of faith had been worth every moment of doubt and fear we'd experienced. The drive from the airport to my apartment was filled with nervous chatter and stolen glances. Alex looked around Seattle with genuine curiosity, commenting on the mountains in the distance and the way the late afternoon light hit the city skyline. Having him in my car, in my space, seeing my world through his eyes, felt surreal and wonderful. We talked about his flight, the time difference, how strange it felt to finally be in the same car together after so many months of virtual connection. There were moments of comfortable silence too, both of us processing the magnitude of what was happening. I kept looking over at him, hardly believing he was really there beside me. "I can't believe I'm actually here," Alex said, echoing my thoughts. "Exactly, and I can't believe you're real." "I mean, I knew you were real, but seeing you, being near you, it's different than I expected. Better." His words sent warmth spreading through my chest, confirming that he was feeling the same mix of wonder and relief that I was experiencing. I pointed out landmarks as we drove, the coffee shop where I'd taken many of our video calls, the park where I walked while talking to him on the phone, the grocery store where I'd bought ingredients for meals we'd cooked together over video chat. Everything in my daily life suddenly had new meaning with him there to share it. As we pulled into my apartment complex, I felt a flutter of nerves about him seeing my home, my private space, the place where I'd spent countless hours talking to him and missing him and hoping for exactly this moment. Walking into my apartment together felt like crossing a threshold into a new chapter of our relationship. Alex looked around with interest, taking in the space he'd seen glimpses of during our video calls but now could experience fully. He smiled when he saw my gaming setup, the chair where I'd sat during thousands of hours of conversation with him. "This is where the magic happened," he said, gesturing toward my computer desk with a grin that made my heart skip. It was strange and wonderful to have him in the space where I'd fallen in love with him, where I'd spent so many nights talking to him until dawn, where I'd made the decision to take this incredible leap of faith. I showed him to the guest room where he'd be staying, suddenly feeling awkward about the sleeping arrangements we discussed extensively but never had to navigate in reality. We'd agreed he'd have his own space to decompress and adjust to the time change, but now I found myself wishing we'd been braver about sharing a room. Alex set down his luggage and turned to face me, his expression soft and slightly overwhelmed. "Thank you," he said simply, "for taking this chance, for letting me come here, for being exactly who I thought you were. I was so scared you'd be disappointed when you saw me in person, but looking at you now, I feel like the luckiest person alive." His words dissolved any remaining awkwardness between us. And I realized that despite never having been physically together before, we already knew each other in the ways that mattered most, making this transition feel natural and right and exactly what we'd both been hoping for. We decided to stay in for Alex's first evening, both of us exhausted from the emotional intensity of finally meeting and him dealing with jet lag from his long journey. I cooked pasta, one of the meals we'd prepared together over video chat months earlier, while Alex sat at my kitchen counter, marveling at how different yet familiar everything felt. The conversation flowed as easily as it always had, but now it was punctuated by small physical interactions that sent electricity through me, him passing me ingredients, our hands brushing when I handed him a glass of wine, the way he leaned against the counter watching me cook with an expression of contentment and wonder. We ate dinner on my couch, watching one of our favorite shows, and I kept stealing glances at his profile in the flickering light of the television. This was everything I'd imagined and more comfortable, natural, filled with the same easy intimacy we developed online, but now enhanced by his physical presence beside me. "This feels like home," Alex said quietly during a commercial break, and I knew exactly what he meant. Despite being in a new country, in an apartment he'd never seen before, surrounded by my things and my life, something about being together felt like coming home for both of us after months of longing. As the evening wound down and jet lag began to take its toll on Alex, I felt a bittersweet mix of contentment and anticipation. Our first day together was ending, but we had 13 more days ahead of us to explore this new dimension of our relationship. I woke up early the next morning, immediately remembering that Alex was sleeping in the room next to mine. The knowledge that he was actually there, just steps away, filled me with a giddy excitement I hadn't felt since childhood Christmas. Mornings, I lay in bed for a few minutes, listening for sounds of him stirring, hardly believing this was my new reality. When I finally got up to make coffee, I found Alex already awake, sitting at my kitchen table with his laptop, trying to video call his parents back in Melbourne. He looked up when I entered, his face breaking into that warm smile that had captured my heart months ago, now even more beautiful in person and in the soft morning light. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, closing his laptop and giving me his full attention. The casual endearment, which we'd used countless times during our online conversations, felt different spoken aloud in my kitchen. More real, more intimate, more like a promise of all the mornings we might share together in the future. I made coffee for both of us, remembering exactly how he liked it from our many virtual coffee dates. Watching him take that first sip and close his eyes in appreciation felt like a small victory, proof that all those months of getting to know each other's preferences and habits had been real preparation for this moment. We sat together at my small kitchen table, planning our day while the Seattle morning unfolded outside my windows, both of us marveling at how natural this felt despite being our first morning waking up in the same space after months of different time zones and virtual connection. Our first full day together, I took Alex on a tour of my Seattle, showing him all the places that had become part of our shared story through months of virtual dates and conversations. We started with Pike Place Market, where the energy and chaos delighted him, and I loved seeing my familiar city through his fresh, excited eyes. At the original Starbucks, we took the tourist photo we joked about during our online conversations, both of us laughing at how surreal it felt to finally be taking pictures together instead of sending separate selfies across the world. Every shared experience felt momentous, like we were collecting proof that this was really happening. Walking through the city together, I was hyper-aware of every casual touch, his hand on my back as we navigated crowds, the way he'd lean close to point something out, how naturally we fell into step beside each other. These small intimacies, impossible during our virtual relationship, felt precious and electric and right. I keep expecting to wake up and find this is all a dream, Alex confessed as we sat by the waterfront watching ferries cross Elliott Bay. I knew exactly what he meant. The whole day had a dreamlike quality, too good and too perfect and too much what we'd both hoped for to feel entirely real. But it was real, evidenced by his hand in mine, his laugh carried on the Seattle breeze, and the way he looked at me like I was the most amazing thing he'd ever seen, making every moment feel like a gift we'd both worked incredibly hard to deserve. By the third day of Alex's visit, we'd settled into a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural for two people who'd never shared physical space before. We cooked breakfast together, explored different neighborhoods, and spent long hours talking on my couch, the same deep conversations we'd always had, but now enhanced by being able to read each other's body language and share comfortable silences. The physical attraction I'd wondered about was definitely there, building gradually through small touches and lingering looks. There was an electric tension between us, the awareness that we were both adults who cared deeply for each other but were still navigating the transition from virtual to physical intimacy at a pace that felt right for both of us. One evening, while watching the sunset from my apartment balcony, Alex reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. The simple gesture sent shivers through me, and when I looked up at him, I saw the same desire and tenderness in his eyes that I was feeling. We were both ready for more, but neither wanted to rush this precious transition. "Sarah," he said softly, "I need you to know that being here with you has exceeded every expectation I had. You're even more wonderful in person than I imagined, and I didn't think that was possible." His words melted my heart and dissolved any remaining barriers between us. That night, we shared our first real kiss on my couch, soft and tentative at first, then deeper as months of longing and love found their physical expression, confirming what we'd both hoped, that our virtual connection translated beautifully into physical chemistry and genuine intimacy. Midway through Alex's visit, it was time for him to meet the important people in my life. I'd arranged dinner with Jessica and a few close friends, nervous about how they'd react to finally meeting the man I'd been talking about for months. Their skepticism had been protective but painful, and I desperately wanted them to see what I saw in Alex. The dinner went better than I could have hoped. Alex was charming without trying too hard, genuinely interested in my friends' stories, and gracious about their initial skepticism. By the end of the evening, even Jessica, my most protective friend, pulled me aside to say, "Okay, I get it now. He's wonderful, and the way he looks at you is exactly how someone should look at the person they love." Meeting my parents was more nerve-wracking, but Alex handled their questions about his intentions, his life in Australia, and his feelings for me with honesty and maturity that impressed them both. My mother later told me she could see why I'd fallen for him, that his kindness and genuine nature were evident within minutes of meeting him. Watching Alex interact with the people who mattered to me felt like watching puzzle pieces fall into place. He fit seamlessly into my world, remembering details about my friends that I'd shared months earlier, asking thoughtful questions, and treating everyone with the same warmth and respect that had made me fall for him originally. If you're enjoying these historias emocionantes de amor and this tale of amor a distancia, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that touch the heart. Your support means everything to creators sharing these real experiences. Seeing my loved ones embrace Alex validated everything I'd felt about our connection and made me realize how much I wanted him to be a permanent part of my life and my world. With only a week left in Alex's visit, we had to address the elephant in the room. What happened next? Our 2 weeks together had been everything we'd hoped for and more, but the reality of his return to Australia loomed over us like a dark cloud, threatening to end this beautiful chapter before it had really begun. We spent an entire afternoon walking around Green Lake, talking through our options. Long-distance relationships were hard enough when you'd never been together. Going back to virtual connection after experiencing physical closeness felt almost impossible to contemplate, yet neither of us was in a position to relocate immediately with careers, family obligations, and practical considerations holding us to our respective continents. Alex had been thinking about the possibility of applying for jobs in Seattle, but the visa process was complicated and could take months or even years. I'd considered moving to Australia, but leaving my career, my family, and everything familiar felt overwhelming, even for love. We were caught between our hearts and practical reality. "I don't want to go back to just video calls after this," Alex said, voicing what we were both thinking. "But I also don't want to pressure you into life changes you're not ready for. This has to work for both of us, or it won't work at all." His consideration for my feelings, even while facing his own heartbreak, reminded me why I'd fallen for him. That conversation was painful but necessary, forcing us to confront the real challenges of international love while also strengthening our commitment to finding a solution that would allow us to build a future together somehow. The next morning, I woke up with unusual clarity about what I wanted. Lying in bed, listening to Alex moving around in the kitchen, I realized that I'd been approaching our situation from a place of fear rather than love. Yes, moving to Australia would be a huge change, but what was the alternative? Letting the best thing that had ever happened to me slip away because I was scared of change. I found Alex making breakfast, looking thoughtful and a bit sad. "I've been thinking," I said, sitting down across from him. "What if I came to Melbourne?" "Not immediately. But what if we made a plan for me to move there in 6 months? That would give me time to save money, research visa options, and prepare for the transition properly." Alex's face went through a series of emotions: surprise, hope, concern, and finally, pure joy. "Are you serious? You'd really consider moving to Australia for us?" he asked, reaching across the table to take my hands. "I want that more than anything, but only if you're sure it's what you want, not just what you think I want to hear." I explained that I'd been researching Australian work visas for people in my field, and the process was challenging but definitely possible. I had savings, marketable skills, and most importantly, a compelling reason to make the move. The idea of building a life with Alex in Melbourne excited me more than staying in Seattle out of comfort and familiarity. We spent the rest of the morning making preliminary plans, researching visa requirements, and talking about what our life together in Australia might look like, transforming our impossible situation into a concrete plan with steps and timelines and hope. Once we'd made the decision for me to move to Australia, everything shifted from hypothetical to practical very quickly. Alex extended his stay by 3 days to help me begin the visa application process, and we spent those extra days gathering documents, filling out forms, and creating a timeline that would bring us back together permanently. Within the airport, buzzing around me felt surreal as I clutched my boarding pass with trembling fingers. 3 months of planning, saving every penny from my part-time job, and convincing my parents had led to this moment. The departure gate loomed ahead like a portal to another world. My heart hammered against my ribs as reality set in completely. Sarah's last message glowed on my phone screen. "Safe travels, my love. I'll be counting every second until you land." Her words gave me strength, but anxiety still coursed through my veins like electricity. What if the connection we'd built through screens didn't translate to real life? What if 3 years of virtual intimacy crumbled in person? The boarding announcement echoed through the terminal, and passengers began forming lines. I watched families saying goodbye, business travelers checking their phones, couples embracing before separation. Here I was, doing the opposite, traveling toward love rather than away from it. The irony wasn't lost on me in that emotional moment. My phone buzzed with notifications from friends wishing me luck, but their messages felt distant now. This journey belonged to Sarah and me alone. Every mile I'd travel would bring us closer to answering the question that had haunted us. could virtual love survive in the physical world? The uncertainty was both terrifying and exhilarating simultaneously. As I stepped toward the gate, my legs felt unsteady but determined. Behind me lay everything familiar and safe. Ahead waited the unknown, adventure, and possibly the greatest love story of my life. The airplane would carry more than just my body across continents. It would transport years of hopes and dreams. The airplane's engines roared to life as we taxied down the runway, and I pressed my face against the small window. Below, my hometown grew smaller until it disappeared entirely beneath clouds. There was no turning back now. The weight of this decision pressed down on me as heavily as the altitude pressed against my ears during a rapid ascent. 14 hours stretched ahead of me like an eternity of anticipation and worrying. I downloaded movies, brought books, and loaded my phone with our favorite songs, but nothing could distract from the magnitude of what I was doing. Every minute that passed brought me closer to Sarah, yet doubt crept in like fog rolling over mountains. The passenger beside me struck up a conversation about travel, asking about my destination and purpose. When I mentioned meeting someone special, her eyes lit up with curiosity. Long-distance relationship, she asked knowingly. I nodded, and she smiled warmly. Those are the strongest kind. You don't stay together for years without real love. Her words comforted me unexpectedly. Somewhere over the Pacific Ocean, turbulence shook the plane and my nerves simultaneously. I gripped the armrests and thought about all the obstacles Sarah and I had already overcome. Time zones, cultural differences, family skepticism, and financial struggles had tested us repeatedly. If we could survive those challenges, surely we could handle meeting face-to-face successfully. As night fell outside my window, I realized I was literally chasing the sun toward Sarah. Each mile brought new hope mixed with terror. The ocean below held secrets and stories of countless lovers separated by distance. Soon, I would add our story to that vast collection of tales. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom announcing our descent, and my stomach dropped faster than the airplane. Through bleary eyes from restless sleep, I watched a foreign landscape emerge through the clouds. This was Sarah's world, the place she'd described in countless conversations, but I'd never imagined I'd actually see with my own eyes. Immigration lines moved slowly, giving me time to process the reality of my situation. My passport felt heavy with significance as I approached the stern-faced officer. Purpose of visit, he asked routinely. Meeting someone very important, I replied, surprised by how steady my voice sounded despite my racing heart and trembling hands throughout the interaction. The baggage claim area buzzed with reunions and farewells that reminded me why I'd made this incredible journey. Families embraced, business partners shook hands, and tourists consulted maps with excitement. I stood among them, part of humanity's eternal dance of connection and separation. My suitcase appeared, and I grabbed it like an anchor to reality. Walking toward the arrivals gate felt like moving through molasses despite my eagerness to reach the other side. Each step brought me closer to the moment that would define everything. Would Sarah be there waiting? Would we recognize each other instantly? Would the spark we'd felt through screens translate to real-life chemistry and genuine attraction? The automatic door slid open, revealing a sea of faces holding signs and scanning the crowd hopefully. Somewhere in that mass of humanity stood the woman who'd captured my heart from 10,000 miles away. The next few minutes would determine whether our love story would continue or end forever. My eyes swept across the crowded arrivals area, searching desperately for the face I'd memorized from thousands of photos and video calls. Families reunited around me with tears and laughter, but I felt suspended in time, caught between hope and fear. Then, through the chaos of moving bodies and rolling luggage, I saw her standing near the information desk. Sarah looked exactly like her photos, yet completely different in 3 dimensions and real lighting. Her nervous smile matched my own as our eyes met across the crowded terminal. For a moment, neither of us moved, as if breaking the spell might shatter everything we'd built. Together, the distance between us felt both infinite and insignificant at the same time. She took the first step, then another, and suddenly we were both moving toward each other through the crowd. People stepped aside instinctively, perhaps sensing the gravity of our moment. My heart pounded so loudly I was certain everyone could hear it echoing through the terminal. This was it, the moment 3 years of virtual love would be tested. Time slowed as we approached each other, and I noticed every detail with startling clarity. Her hair caught the fluorescent light differently than my computer screen had shown. Her height matched my expectations perfectly. The way she moved was graceful yet uncertain, mirroring my own nervous energy. We were both scared and excited simultaneously, I could tell. 3 feet apart, we stopped and looked into each other's eyes without the barrier of screens for the first time ever. The recognition was instant and profound. This was definitely my Sarah, the woman who'd stolen my heart through pixels and promises. Now we stood on the precipice of discovering if virtual love could become real. "Hi," she whispered, her voice exactly as I remembered from countless late-night phone calls, yet somehow more real and present than ever before. The simple word carried 3 years of longing, hope, and uncertainty. I opened my mouth to respond but found myself speechless, overwhelmed by the surreal nature of finally standing before her in person. "Hi yourself," I finally managed, my voice cracking slightly with emotion and exhaustion from the long journey. We stood there awkwardly for a moment, unsure of the protocol for meeting someone you love but have never touched. Should we shake hands, hug immediately, kiss? The uncertainty hung between us like morning mist waiting for sunshine. Sarah stepped forward and opened her arms tentatively, offering an embrace that I accepted gratefully and immediately. The moment our bodies touched, every doubt I'd harbored during the journey melted away completely. She felt warm, real, and perfectly familiar despite being a stranger to my physical senses. Her perfume was subtle and sweet, nothing like I'd imagined. The hug lasted longer than socially appropriate for strangers, but we weren't strangers despite never having met before this moment. 3 years of emotional intimacy had created a bond that transcended physical presence. When we finally separated, both of us had tears in our eyes and matching smiles that could have powered the entire airport terminal. "You're really here," she said, touching my arm gently as if to confirm I wasn't a hologram or dream. "I'm really here," I confirmed, still processing the miracle of our meeting. The first hurdle had been cleared successfully. We were definitely attracted to each other in person as much as virtually. Sarah led me through the airport with confident steps while I struggled to process the sensory overload of being in a completely foreign country. The signs were in languages I couldn't read, the architecture was different from home, and even the air smelled unfamiliar. Yet walking beside her made everything feel less overwhelming and more like an adventure we were sharing. Together, "How was your flight?" she asked as we navigated toward the exit, her hand occasionally brushing mine as we walked. The casual contact sent electric shocks through my system, reminding me that this was all real now. No more screens between us, no more delayed messages or pixelated video calls. We were occupying the same physical space for the first time ever. The taxi ride to her apartment gave us time to talk and adjust to each other's physical presence gradually. She pointed out landmarks and shared stories about her neighborhood while I tried to reconcile the Sarah sitting beside me with the one I'd known virtually. They were the same person, yet meeting her in 3 dimensions added layers I'd never experienced before. "Are you nervous?" she asked during a quiet moment in the taxi, her hand finding mine and intertwining our fingers naturally. The gesture felt both brand new and completely familiar. Terrified, I admitted honestly, but in the best possible way. She squeezed my hand gently. "Same, this is either going to be amazing or a complete disaster." Her apartment building appeared outside the taxi window, and my stomach fluttered with anticipation mixed with anxiety. This was where Sarah lived her daily life, the space she'd shown me glimpses of through video calls. Now I would experience it firsthand and become part of her world rather than just observing it through technology. Sarah's apartment was exactly as I'd imagined, yet completely different from the limited view I'd had through our video calls over the years. The living room where we'd spent countless virtual hours together felt smaller in person, but warmer and more inviting. Personal touches I'd never noticed through the camera revealed themselves everywhere: books, photos, little decorations that told her story. "Welcome to my humble home," she said with a nervous laugh, suddenly self-conscious about her space in a way she'd never been during our video chats. I walked around slowly, taking in every detail like a detective gathering clues about her real life. The couch where she'd sat during our conversations, the kitchen where she'd cooked while we talked, the window with the view she'd described so many times. She made tea while I explored, both of us needing something to do with our hands while we adjusted to sharing physical space. The domestic scene felt surreal after years of digital interaction. Here we were, performing the simple ritual of making beverages together, something couples do every day but we were experiencing for the very first time together. "This is so weird," she said, echoing my own thoughts as we sat on her couch with steaming mugs between us. "Good weird or bad weird?" I asked, studying her face for any signs of disappointment or regret. She smiled and moved closer to me on the cushions. "Definitely good weird. You're exactly who I thought you were, just more real." The afternoon sunlight streaming through her window illuminated dust motes dancing in the air between us, and I realized we were creating new memories in the same space where she'd lived her entire life without me. Now I was part of her world rather than just a voice from another continent far away. The first evening together revealed how much we still had to learn about each other despite 3 years of constant communication and emotional intimacy. Sarah moved through her apartment with unconscious grace, turning on lamps and adjusting cushions in ways I'd never observed through video calls. Every gesture was new information about the woman I thought I knew completely already. Dinner was a careful dance of politeness mixed with familiarity that felt strange and wonderful simultaneously throughout the entire meal. We'd shared thousands of meals virtually, eating while video chatting across time zones, but sitting across from each other at her small dining table was entirely different. I could smell her food, hear her chew, observe her table manners up close for the first time. "Do I eat differently than you expected?" she asked with a laugh, noticing my fascination with these mundane details I'd never experienced before. "Everything about you is different and exactly the same," I replied honestly. "It's like meeting someone I've known forever, but also meeting them for the very first time." Does that make any sense to you? After dinner, we sat on her couch watching a movie we'd planned to see together for months, but never could due to different release dates in our respective countries. Having her warm body pressed against mine while we watched felt like the most natural thing in the world, yet also like a miracle I'd never thought would actually happen in real life. As the evening progressed, our conversation flowed as easily as it always had, but now it was punctuated by touches, glances, and shared physical space that added depth to every word we spoke. We were still us, but we were becoming something more than we'd ever been before through digital connection alone. As bedtime approached, the elephant in the room grew larger and more impossible to ignore gracefully or naturally. We discussed sleeping arrangements during our planning calls, deciding I'd take the couch for the first few nights while we adjusted to each other's physical presence. The decision had seemed practical and respectful from 10,000 miles away, but now felt awkwardly formal given our emotional intimacy. Sarah brought me pillows and blankets, her movements betraying the same nervous energy I felt coursing through my own body and mind. "Are you sure you'll be comfortable out here?" she asked for the third time, clearly as uncertain about the arrangement as I was. The couch was perfectly adequate, but we both knew comfort wasn't really the issue at hand. "I'll be fine," I assured her, though we both knew I'd probably lie awake most of the night processing everything that had happened since my plane landed that morning. Being in the same apartment, breathing the same air, existing in the same physical space felt like magic after years of digital separation across continents and time zones. She lingered in the doorway to her bedroom, neither of us quite ready to end this momentous first day together despite our exhaustion. "Thank you," she said softly, "for coming all this way, for taking this crazy leap of faith with me, for being exactly who I hoped you'd be in person." Her words wrapped around my heart like a warm embrace. "Thank you for being worth the journey," I replied, meaning every word completely and honestly. As she disappeared into her room, I settled onto the couch and stared at the ceiling, marveling at how much my life had changed in a single day. Tomorrow would bring new discoveries about us, but tonight I was simply grateful to be here. Waking up in Sarah's apartment felt like emerging from a vivid dream into an even more surreal reality than I could have imagined. Sunlight streamed through unfamiliar windows, and the sounds of her morning routine drifted from the kitchen, coffee brewing, dishes clinking, her humming a tune I'd heard through video calls but never experienced in three-dimensional surround sound before. "Good morning, sleepyhead," she called when she heard me stirring on the couch, her voice carrying the warmth and affection I'd grown to love, but now without the digital compression that had filtered it for years. I stumbled toward the kitchen, still adjusting to seeing her in person first thing in the morning without makeup or carefully arranged lighting for our video calls. She looked beautiful in a completely natural and guarded way that no camera had ever captured adequately or accurately. Her hair was messy from sleep, she wore an oversized t-shirt and pajama pants, and her face was soft with morning drowsiness. This was the Sarah who existed between our scheduled video calls, the version of her I'd never seen before yesterday. "Coffee?" she offered, already pouring a second cup in the way she'd learned I preferred during our countless breakfast video chats over the past 3 years. The domestic intimacy of the gesture struck me as profoundly significant. We were sharing morning routines like a real couple instead of coordinating across time zones to eat breakfast together through screens. As we sat at her small kitchen table sipping coffee and sharing comfortable silence, I realized we'd crossed an invisible threshold during the night. The awkwardness of first meeting had softened into something more natural and relaxed. We were beginning to feel like ourselves again, just in the same physical space for the first time ever. Sarah had taken time off work to spend with me during my visit, and she'd planned a tour of her city that would let us experience everything together that she'd only been able to describe through words and photos before. Walking hand in hand down streets she traveled alone for years felt symbolic of how I was becoming part of her real life rather than just her virtual one. The market she'd mentioned in countless conversations bustled with activity that overwhelmed my senses in the most wonderful way possible. Vendors called out in languages I didn't understand, exotic fruits filled stalls with colors I'd never seen, and spices created an aromatic symphony that no video call could have conveyed. Sarah guided me through it all with obvious pride and excitement. "This is where I buy the coffee I'm always drinking during our morning calls," she explained, stopping at a small stall run by an elderly woman who greeted Sarah like an old friend. The woman looked at me with curious eyes and said something in their local language that made Sarah blush and laugh. "She says you're handsome and I'm lucky," Sarah translated with obvious embarrassment. We sampled foods I'd watched her eat through video calls, visited the bookstore where she spent weekend afternoons, and sat in the park where she'd taken many of the photos she'd sent me over the years. Each location added depth and context to stories I'd heard but never been able to fully visualize or understand until experiencing them firsthand with her. By afternoon, we'd settled into a rhythm of exploration and discovery that felt natural despite being completely new to us both. I was seeing her world through her eyes while she experienced familiar places through mine, creating shared memories in locations that had previously belonged only to her individual life and personal history. That evening, we cooked dinner together in her small kitchen, and the collaboration revealed new dimensions of our compatibility that video calls had never been able to test or demonstrate. She was organized and methodical while I was more intuitive and spontaneous, But our different approaches complemented each other perfectly as we prepared the meal she'd promised to make for me months ago. "I've imagined this so many times," she said as we worked side by side, occasionally bumping into each other in the narrow space between counter and stove. "Cooking with you, having you here to taste my food immediately instead of describing it through video calls while you eat something completely different on your side of the world thousands of miles away." The meal was delicious. But more importantly, it was ours in a way that felt revolutionary after years of eating together while actually being alone in our respective kitchens on different continents. We lingered over dinner, talking and laughing as the candles she'd lit burned lower, and the evening deepened around us like a warm embrace we'd waited years to share. After dinner, we settled on her couch again, but this time the physical closeness felt less tentative and more natural than it had the night before. She curled against my side while we talked, her head on my shoulder, her hand resting on my chest. The casual intimacy was everything I'd hoped for and more than I'd dared to expect. "I keep expecting to wake up and find this is all a dream," she murmured against my shoulder as the evening grew late around us. "I know exactly what you mean," I replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "But if it is a dream, I never want to wake up from it." The third night brought a shift in our dynamic that felt as natural as breathing despite being monumental in its significance for our relationship. As Sarah prepared to say goodnight and retreat to her bedroom while I settled on the couch again, she paused in the doorway with an expression I'd never seen before during our video calls, vulnerable yet determined, nervous yet certain. "This is ridiculous," she said softly, more to herself than to me. But I heard every word clearly in the quiet apartment. "We've been together for 3 years. We love each other. We're adults who travel 10,000 miles to be together. And we're acting like strangers who just met at a coffee shop this afternoon." I sat up on the couch, my heart racing as I understood what she was saying without her having to spell it out completely or explicitly. "Are you sure?" I asked, wanting to respect her boundaries and comfort level while also hoping desperately that she meant what I thought she meant. "I don't want to rush anything or make you uncomfortable in any way." She walked back toward me with steps that were steady despite the magnitude of what was happening between us in this moment. "I've never been more sure of anything in my entire life," she said, reaching for my hands and pulling me to my feet. "I want to fall asleep next to you and wake up beside you. I want to stop pretending we're not already completely committed to each other." As she led me toward her bedroom, my heart felt like it might burst with happiness and relief and love so intense it was almost overwhelming. This wasn't just about physical intimacy, it was about finally, truly being together in every sense of the word after years of separation and digital connection that had sustained us, but never fully satisfied our longing. Waking up beside Sarah felt like the missing piece of a puzzle finally clicking into place after years of searching and waiting patiently. Her face was peaceful in sleep, her breathing steady and warm against my chest where her head rested. Sunlight filtered through her bedroom curtains, illuminating the scene with golden light that made everything feel magical and perfect and exactly right. She stirred as consciousness returned, her eyes fluttering open to meet mine with a smile that could have powered entire cities with its radiance and joy. "Good morning, beautiful," I whispered, still hardly believing this was real and not another vivid dream that would evaporate when my alarm clock rang in my apartment 10,000 miles away from this perfect moment. "Best good morning ever," she replied, stretching against me like a contented cat before settling back into the circle of my arms where she fit perfectly. I could get used to this very quickly and easily. "Actually, I think I'm already completely addicted to having you here beside me instead of on a screen across the world." We lay there talking softly as the morning progressed around us, sharing thoughts and feelings with a new level of intimacy that physical presence hadn't locked between us. Every conversation we'd had over the past 3 years had been building toward this moment of complete connection and unity that transcended anything technology could have provided for us. The outside world felt distant and irrelevant as we existed in our bubble of newfound togetherness and joy. We'd successfully bridged the gap between virtual and real love, proving that genuine connection could survive and thrive despite distance, time zones and all the obstacles that had tried to keep us apart for so long. As my visit progressed, we both began to confront the elephant in the room that we'd been avoiding during the honeymoon phase of our first meeting and physical connection. I had a return ticket, a life waiting for me back home, and responsibilities that couldn't be ignored indefinitely despite how much we both wanted to pretend this bubble could last forever without consequences. "How much time do we have left?" Sarah asked one morning over coffee, her voice carefully neutral despite the pain I could see in her eyes when she thought about my eventual departure. The question hung between us like a storm cloud threatening to rain on our perfect parade of happiness and newfound physical intimacy. "2 weeks," I replied, the words tasting bitter in my mouth despite the sweetness of the coffee she'd prepared exactly how I liked it. But we don't have to think about that right now. Let's just focus on making the most of every moment we have together instead of worrying about the future we can't control yet. Even as I said the words, I knew we were both thinking about what would happen when I boarded that plane back to my old life and we returned to video calls and text messages and the ache of separation that had driven me to make this journey in the first place. Could we go back to virtual love after experiencing the real thing? The conversation shifted to lighter topics, but the awareness of our limited time together added a bittersweet quality to everything we did from that moment forward. Every kiss felt precious, every shared meal significant, every mundane moment together like a treasure to be stored away for the lonely nights that awaited us both after my departure back to reality. The reality of our situation forced us to have conversations we'd been avoiding about the future of our relationship beyond my visit and return to life on the other side of the world. We sat on her couch one evening, laptops open, researching visa requirements, job opportunities, and the practical logistics of closing the distance between us permanently rather than temporarily through brief visits. "I could apply for a work visa in your country," Sarah said, scrolling through government websites with the determination I'd come to love about her over the years. "Or you could look into opportunities here. We have options, even if they're complicated and will take time to navigate successfully and legally." The conversation was both exciting and terrifying as we discussed uprooting entire lives for love, leaving behind families and friends and familiar places for the unknown adventure of building a life together in the same location. It was the ultimate test of our commitment to each other and our relationship's strength and potential longevity. We made lists of pros and cons, researched cost of living differences, and video called our respective families to gauge their reactions to our plans for permanently closing the distance between us. The responses were mixed, some supportive, others concerned, all understandably cautious about such a major life change based on a relationship that had been virtual until recently. As the evening progressed, our planning session evolved from practical logistics to dreams and hopes for our shared future together. We talked about the apartment we'd share, the routines we'd develop, the holidays we'd celebrate together instead of through video calls across time zones that made coordination difficult and sometimes impossible to manage effectively. With the awareness that our time together was limited, every moment took on heightened significance and emotional weight that made even mundane activities feel special and worth savoring completely. Grocery shopping became an adventure. Cooking breakfast together felt like a sacred ritual, and falling asleep in each other's arms was a nightly miracle we both treasured deeply and completely. Sarah took more time off work so we could explore beyond her city, taking day trips to places she'd always wanted to visit, but had never had the right companion to share them with until now. We hiked through mountains she'd described in messages, swam in lakes she'd photographed for me, and wandered through small towns that felt like fairy tale settings for our real-life love story. "I want to show you everything," she said as we stood on a cliff overlooking a valley painted in autumn colors that no photograph could have adequately captured or conveyed. "I want you to fall in love with this place the way I've fallen in love with you, so that when you think about coming back, it won't just be for me." Each new experience we shared became part of our story, adding chapters to the narrative we'd been writing together for 3 years but had never been able to illustrate with shared adventures and mutual discoveries. We were finally living our love story instead of just talking about it through screens and imagining what it might be like someday. The photographs we took during these excursions would become treasures more valuable than gold during the separation that awaited us both. Every image captured not just a moment in time, but proof that our love had successfully transitioned from virtual to real, from dreams to lived experience that no one could take away from us ever. As my departure date approached, with inevitable certainty, we found ourselves having increasingly difficult conversations about the immediate future and how we'd handle returning to long-distance status after experiencing the joy and completeness of being together physically. The prospect felt more daunting now that we knew what we'd be missing and sacrificing temporarily for practical necessities. "I don't know how I'm going to go back to video calls after having you here," Sarah admitted one night as we lay in bed, her voice thick with emotion she'd been trying to suppress for days. "Everything is going to feel so empty and incomplete after this. Our apartment, our routines, even our conversations won't be the same anymore." I held her closer, wishing I could promise that the separation would be brief and painless. But we both knew that visa applications and job searches and life changes took time that would feel eternal when measured in lonely nights and missed opportunities for physical comfort and presence. The practical reality was harsh compared to our romantic ideals and hopes. We talked about strategies for maintaining our connection during the separation, scheduled video dates, care packages, countdown calendars marking time until we could be together permanently instead of just temporarily. The planning helped ease some anxiety, but couldn't eliminate the fundamental sadness of impending separation that hung over us like a shadow growing longer each day. "Promise me something," she said, turning to face me in the darkness of her bedroom that had become our sanctuary from the world and its demands. "Promise me that no matter how hard it gets, we won't give up on this. What we have is too special to let distance defeat us again." The final week of my visit passed in a blur of bittersweet moments that we tried to stretch and savor while simultaneously dreading their conclusion and my inevitable return to life on the other side of the world. Every last felt significant. Our last Sunday morning sleeping in together, our last trip to the market, our last dinner at her favorite restaurant that had become ours. We became more physically affectionate as departure loomed, as if touch could somehow compensate for the approaching absence and separation we'd have to endure. Hand-holding during walks, spontaneous hugs while cooking, falling asleep completely intertwined, we were storing up physical connection to sustain us through the digital relationship we'd have to return to temporarily while working toward permanent reunion. Sarah started a countdown calendar on her refrigerator, marking off days until my departure with a mixture of dread and determination to make each remaining moment count for something meaningful and memorable. 37 more breakfasts together, she'd say, or 22 more nights in the same bed, turning our limited time into precious commodities to be treasured completely. We took more photos during this final week than we had during the entire rest of my visit, documenting everything from elaborate date nights to quiet moments reading together on her couch. Each image would become a lifeline during the separation ahead, visual proof that our time together had been real and not just an elaborate dream or fantasy. The conversations during this period oscillated between practical planning for my departure and our future reunion, and desperate attempts to ignore the approaching separation by focusing entirely on the present moment and the joy we'd found in each other's physical presence after years of virtual connection and patient waiting. Our final night together felt surreal and precious and heartbreaking all at once, like trying to hold water in cupped hands while knowing it would inevitably slip through our fingers despite our best efforts to preserve every drop and moment. We'd planned a special dinner at home, but neither of us had much appetite for food when our hearts were so full of love and impending loss. "I keep thinking I should memorize everything about tonight," Sarah said as we sat on her couch after barely touching our carefully prepared meal, her head resting on my shoulder in the position that had become our default and most comfortable arrangement. "The way you smell, the sound of your breathing, how perfectly you fit against me when we sit like this." We stayed up far too late, neither wanting to sleep away our precious final hours together, talking about everything and nothing while the clock ticked toward morning with relentless inevitability. Every topic felt simultaneously important and trivial compared to the magnitude of what we were facing. Another separation after finally understanding what we'd been missing all these years through virtual connection alone. "I have something for you," she said near midnight, disappearing into her bedroom and returning with a small wrapped package that she placed in my hands with ceremony that made my heart race with anticipation and gratitude. "Don't open it until you're on the plane tomorrow. Promise me you'll wait until then to look inside." As we finally went to bed for our last night together, we held each other with desperate intensity. As if physical closeness could somehow stop time or change the reality of airline tickets and visa requirements and all the practical obstacles that were about to separate us again after this perfect month of shared life and love. The morning of my departure arrived with cruel punctuality despite our wishes that time would slow down or stop entirely to give us more moments together before reality intruded on our perfect bubble of love and connection. Sarah's alarm clock seemed louder than usual, and the sunlight streaming through her bedroom windows felt harsh rather than warm and welcoming as it had every other morning of my visit. We moved through the morning routine of shower, coffee, and final packing with mechanical efficiency that masked the emotional turmoil we were both experiencing but trying to contain for each other's sake. Every mundane action felt loaded with significance. This was the last time I'd brush my teeth at her sink, the last time we'd share coffee at her kitchen table. The taxi ride to the airport was quiet except for the soft music playing on the radio and the occasional directions Sarah gave the driver in her native language that I'd grown to love hearing even without understanding the words completely. Her hand never left mine during the journey, as if physical contact could anchor us together despite the approaching separation. At the airport, we lingered in the departure area as long as security regulations would allow, neither wanting to say the words that would make my leaving official and final. Other travelers moved around us with purpose and efficiency while we existed in our bubble of reluctant. The immigration officer's stern expression made my heart sink as he examined my documents with unusual scrutiny. My tourist visa was valid, but something in his demeanor suggested complications I hadn't anticipated. The questions came rapidly: purpose of visit, duration of stay, proof of return ticket, financial support documentation. Sarah waited anxiously in the arrivals area, completely unaware of the bureaucratic maze unfolding just meters away from our planned reunion. Each passing minute felt like an eternity as I provided additional documentation and explanations. The officer's colleague joined the conversation, their hushed tones creating an atmosphere of mounting tension. "Sir, we need to verify some information with our database," the officer finally announced, directing me to a separate waiting area. My phone had no signal in this section of the airport, making communication with Sarah impossible. Other travelers in similar situations sat around me, their faces reflecting the same mixture of frustration and anxiety. The waiting area's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I replayed every detail of my travel preparations, wondering what could have triggered this additional scrutiny. My documentation was complete, my intentions legitimate, yet bureaucracy had created an unexpected obstacle at the final hurdle. Time seemed suspended in this liminal space between countries. 2 hours passed before my name was called again, each minute adding weight to the emotional burden of delayed reunion. The anticipation that had sustained me through months of planning now transformed into a different kind of tension, one where love met the reality of international borders and administrative procedures. The second interview proved more thorough but ultimately successful as I calmly answered every question about my relationship with Sarah and my travel intentions. The officer's expression gradually softened when I showed him printed conversations, photos, and detailed itinerary plans that demonstrated the genuine nature of my visit. Documentation of our 2-year correspondence provided compelling evidence of legitimate romantic intent. "Everything appears to be in order," he finally announced, stamping my passport with the official entry seal that represented freedom to continue my journey. Relief flooded through me as I gathered my belongings, knowing that Sarah had been waiting for over 3 hours without any explanation for my delay. The automatic doors of the immigration area opened like curtains revealing the final act of our long-distance love story. Sarah stood near the information desk, her eyes scanning every face that emerged from the restricted area. Her expression showed concern mixed with unwavering hope, a testament to the patience that had characterized our entire relationship. Our eyes met across the crowded arrivals hall, and time seemed to slow as recognition dawned on her face. The relief in her expression mirrored my own as she began moving toward me, navigating through the crowd of other travelers and waiting families. Every step closed the physical distance that had defined our relationship for so long. The bureaucratic delay had only intensified the anticipation of our first meeting, adding another layer of earned victory to this moment we had imagined countless times. Sometimes obstacles make the destination more precious, and our love had proven resilient enough to withstand even unexpected administrative challenges. Sarah reached me first, her face glowing with joy and relief as we stood just arm's length apart after 2 years of virtual connection. Neither of us spoke initially. Words seemed inadequate for this moment we had rehearsed in our minds thousands of times. The bustling airport around us faded into background noise as we existed in our own bubble of realized dreams. "You're really here," she whispered, her voice carrying the same warmth I had grown to love through countless phone calls, now accompanied by the visual reality of her expressions. Her eyes held tears of happiness as she reached out tentatively, as if confirming I wasn't another dream that would dissolve upon contact. Our first embrace lasted several minutes, neither wanting to break the spell of physical presence after so long existing only in digital spaces. Her perfume, the texture of her hair, the reality of her heartbeat against my chest, these sensory details had been missing from our virtual relationship, now flooding my consciousness with overwhelming completeness. "I was so worried when you didn't come out," she explained, her arms still wrapped around me as if ensuring I couldn't disappear back into the virtual realm. The immigration delay seemed insignificant now, just another story in our collection of obstacles overcome through patience and determination. Airport security gently reminded us to move away from the restricted area, but we barely heard them, lost in the miracle of physical presence. Our first touch had transformed our relationship from digital possibility into tangible reality, validating every moment of faith we had invested in this long-distance love story. Hand in hand, we walked through the airport terminal toward the exit, our fingers intertwined in a gesture that felt both natural and miraculous after existing only in imagination for so long. Every step together marked our transition from virtual lovers to a couple sharing physical space, breathing the same air, existing in the same moment. The taxi ride to Sarah's apartment filled with nervous excitement as we sat close together, still adjusting to the reality of physical presence. Conversation flowed easily despite the surreal nature of finally being together. Our emotional connection had been so thoroughly established that physical proximity felt like a natural evolution rather than an awkward beginning. "I keep wanting to take photos to prove this is real," Sarah laughed, capturing our reflection in the taxi window as the city lights streamed past. The familiar landmarks she had described during our video calls now appeared before my own eyes, transforming her verbal descriptions into visual reality. Her apartment building looked exactly as she had shown me during virtual tour, yet seeing it with my own eyes carried different weight. This was where she lived her daily life, the space I had glimpsed in fragments through computer screens, now welcoming me as a physical guest rather than a digital visitor. Standing before her apartment door, we paused for a moment to acknowledge the significance of this threshold. Beyond this door lay the private space where our virtual relationship would transform into something entirely new. A love story that had begun in pixels would continue in the physical world. Sarah's apartment felt like entering a familiar place I had never actually visited, filled with objects I recognized from video calls but could now touch and examine. The couch where she sat during our conversations, the kitchen where she prepared meals while we talked, the bookshelf she had shown me book by book, all existed in 3 dimensions rather than compressed pixels. "Welcome to my world," she said softly, watching me take in the space that had been the backdrop for so many of our digital dates. The reality exceeded every virtual tour, filled with details that cameras couldn't capture. The way afternoon light filtered through her windows, the scent of her favorite candles, the texture of fabrics I had only seen on screen. We spent the evening talking and laughing, rediscovering each other through physical presence while maintaining the emotional intimacy we had carefully built online. The transition felt seamless because our connection had always been based on genuine compatibility rather than physical attraction alone. Our love had proven itself in the most challenging circumstances possible. As night fell, we sat on her balcony looking at the same stars I could see from my home country, but now we observed them together rather than describing them through video calls. The distance that had once separated us had become just a memory, replaced by the warmth of shared presence and realized dreams. Our virtual love story had become a real-world romance, proving that genuine connection can transcend physical boundaries when two people are willing to invest faith, patience, and unwavering commitment. Sometimes the greatest love stories begin with the courage to believe in something that exists only in the heart, waiting for the right moment to become reality. 3 months later, as I prepared for my return home, we both knew our relationship had fundamentally transformed through the experience of physical presence. The time together had validated every moment of faith we had invested in our long-distance connection, proving that love built on genuine compatibility could withstand any test, including the ultimate challenge of meeting in person. We had spent those months exploring her city together, creating new memories while honoring the virtual foundation that had brought us to this point. Every shared experience, walking through parks she had described, eating at restaurants she had recommended, meeting friends I had only known through stories, added layers to our connection that enriched rather than replaced our digital bond. The decision to continue our relationship despite the distance felt different now, informed by the knowledge that our virtual connection translated beautifully into physical compatibility. We had proof that our love could exist in any format, strengthened by every challenge we had overcome together through patience, communication, and unwavering belief in each other. Our story represents countless modern love stories where technology enables connections that transcend traditional boundaries of geography and circumstance. In a world where historias emocionantes de amor a distancia, romance virtual, reencontro emocionante, historias que tocan the heart are increasingly common. Our experience offers hope that genuine connection can flourish in any medium when nurtured with authentic intention. Love that begins in virtual spaces and grows through digital communication can become as real and lasting as any traditional romance, sometimes even stronger because it requires deeper emotional investment and unwavering faith. Our 10,000-kilometer journey to a first embrace proved that distance is just a number when two hearts are truly connected, and that the most beautiful love stories often begin with the courage to believe in something that exists first in the realm of possibility, waiting patiently to become reality through determination, faith, and the transformative power of human connection.